Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our March PTSA meeting. Thank you for joining us the week before spring break. I know we're all looking forward to that. So we're going to go through the agenda this evening. So we are pleased to have some guest speakers this evening from Potomac Oaks Tutoring, and we'll introduce them to you shortly. Lisa and Pavel, and the topics tonight are going to be on summer internships and other opportunities, extracurricular opportunities that students can put on their college resumes and college applications. And then part two is going to be around the SAT, the new digital SAT, but also looking at the SAT versus the ACT. So we're going to go ahead and move into some of my comments, and then we'll move on from there. So we have a number of ADA and safety improvements that are going to be completed on our school in summer 24 and summer 25. So we had a community meeting a couple of weeks ago where we learned what those improvements are going to be. I'm going to go through that really quickly with you in a moment. I do want to let you know that there's supposed to be a community meeting coming up in April. And out of the community meeting that we had a couple weeks ago, they told us about the realignment of the front driveway for safety reasons and having a dedicated bus loop. And so they were going to share more details in April. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to go ahead and move to a different screen. Jessica, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is from the community meeting that occurred on March 4th. And as you all may have heard through our newsletter and from other media in meetings that you've attended, the county executive has made some recommendations for the capital improvement program, capital improvement program funds facilities across Montgomery County. MCPS has a CIP as well as other Montgomery County agencies. So the MCPS CIP budget has the county executive is recommending cuts. Now it's the Montgomery County Council that makes the decision on cuts, and the county executive makes the recommendation. So CIPs work over a 6-year period, and this 6-year period covers 25 to 30. And you can see for the total, it's almost $2 billion total over that 6-year period. And the budget recommendation is 1.908, which is a difference of 91, which is $91 million, which is a good amount of money. And you can see the cuts that are here each year. So there's extensive cuts occurring across all of these years, 54 million in 25, 110 million in 26, and so forth. So the county executive is leaving funds in the later years, but that doesn't really help those projects that need to start off with funding. And so projects that are coming up, like our project, the Wooten project, the Cold Spring project, are going to be impacted if these cuts are approved by the county council. So the board did receive a letter from the county council, and MCPS responded with 2 scenarios, neither of which is very good for us. I'll just slide down here. And these slides are available. I did provide a link in the newsletter that I sent out. We sent out this week, but we can, this is on the Montgomery County Design and Construction website. And there is a construction page for Wooten on that website as well. So you can see in here that there are going to be cuts to multiple different projects. For scenario A, remove all planning and construction funds with a completion date of to be determined for the following two high school major capital projects, Magruder Wooten, two of the only remaining schools built before 1980 that have not had any renovations. In scenario B, also not a good thing either. In this one, they're talking about delaying the planning funds. The planning funds are the funds that are needed to plan the project. So delay the planning funds to FY 29. Planning funds would have been provided in 2025, which is next year. So there was going to be planning funds next year, and the project would have gotten underway in 27. So we're talking about delaying it to 29 with a completion date of to be determined. And so what that tells you is that our CIP goes through 2030. So the project then is being pushed beyond 2030, which is why it says to be determined. So we're talking about an extensive delay. But we're going to go to look down at the improvements. So many of you may have seen pictures, at least, of the new weight room. So we can be proud of this part of our facility that looks amazing and very modern. So this was just recently completed for this school year. Our students and our coaches are very excited about it. The weight training class is using it, and it's been really incredible. Some of the other things that are going to happen, they're going to be MCPS will be replacing the artificial turf that is about 2 years beyond its life. The life of a turf field is 10 years. So they're going to be replacing that this summer. They're also going to be doing painting, interior painting and exterior painting. There's some flooring replacement in the main office. And then there's going to be some architectural and site improvements. And we'll look at that real quick here. Those of you that have been to our auditorium, and probably everyone has, there are restrooms, very old looking restrooms on the side of the auditorium. Those restrooms are going to be redesigned. So you can see the existing restrooms are like, this picture here, but the new restrooms are going to be this new type of style restroom where there's going to be handicap accessible stalls. But each one of these stalls is enclosed by a door. So it is a floor to ceiling space with a door that closes. The sinks are across the way. So this is single use restrooms. So anybody can use it. There's an opening to come in, easy access for somebody in a wheelchair or using a walker can easily get in here. It's really a big improvement over what we have now. So I have a feeling that a lot of our students are going to want to use that restroom. This gives you an idea of what it would look like. So this is similar to what it would look like. Okay, and I think this is just. I think that's just another picture of it. Okay, so then the auditorium. There's going to be some changes to the auditorium. The auditorium is not accessible now. So there'll be accessible seating. There'll be an accessible, the pit will be accessible, the stage will be accessible. There's ramps to make that they're sloped correctly. And then there's a ADA compliant ticket counter. And there's a lift here to get up to the control room. So there's a lot of accessibility that is being built in here. And then, as many of you know, we do have a lot of broken seats in the auditorium. They did promise that they would, since they have to remove a number of seats, they're going to replace the broken seats with the ones they have to remove. So we'll get the seating fixed in there. So this shows you the existing and the proposed. So really great changes for those students who are unable to participate in activities that occur in the auditorium. Additionally, there's going to be some work on the grounds. Egress is going to be worked on, making sure that our students can safely exit the building. So that's going to be taking place as well. There's the baseball field access is not accessible now, so there's going to be accessibility built in there so that the our sports fields can be accessible there. Here's an example of egress that is not ADA compliant, so they're going to be addressing on that as well to make sure that you know, in an evacuation, and we've had a couple of those this year, that we need our students to be able to exit quickly and safely. And they're going to fix some of these curbs that don't have curb cuts in it, so that those in wheelchairs or using walkers can easily navigate that area. They're also have some cafeteria egress, some improved egress there as well. There's a very difficult sloping in the front area. Doug, jump in if I'm missing something in here. So there's a list of the anticipated work that's going to take place, what they're calling phase 1. Many of the things I just went over, and then phase 2 is going to include the bus loop reconfiguration, stadium access. That's another area where we do not have accessibility for ADA compliant accessibility. Special education drop-off area, that's a really critical area as well. Access to the tennis courts, sidewalk at the rear of the building, main entrance egress, and so forth. So some of these, the reason why these items are being pushed to next summer is because there's some permitting that has to take place and some activities that they have to complete for City of Rockville permitting process. All right, I'm going to switch back over.
Brian,
Are you
do you
still
mind if I
able to
just
see my?
jump in on
Oh, yeah,
a few
please.
things? Thank you very much for that presentation. I think that really accurately summarizes much of what was shared at the community meeting. Just to add on a little bit, that second set of bathrooms that you showed, Brian, that is the redone ADA layout for the auditorium bathrooms, which currently do not have that space in them. So you saw the upgraded main bathroom outside the gymnasium. We're getting upgraded bathroom facilities next to the auditorium. And this is just showing how they are now ADA compliant because they currently are not. So that's the image right there. One little note about this upgraded bathroom that I know looks really great. One flow of information that I hear as a principal often is for students that have bathrooms being locked. This new upgraded bathroom is now one that cannot be locked. The open access, you can flow in and out of it almost like those kind of more modern bathrooms you see in airports these days. You can just flow right in and out of it. Security can walk through. Like the space that locks is the actual toilet facility. So everything else is just kind of open access. So now we have bathrooms that cannot be locked down. Of course, they could break or something that would make them not usable, but you cannot have a locked facility, which is our main focus that we took to, stop any nefarious behavior that happens in a bathroom. So I think that's going to be great for some of our students. Just need to know where can you access a bathroom at any time. And one other thing I wanted to expand upon, Brian mentioned that we're going to have lots of painting in the building. It actually is a pretty extensive painting project. While we'll not be in classrooms, most of the other common areas throughout the school, we're talking hallways, into the media center, the gymnasium, like the commons. We're going to have major spaces of the school painted. This also means that the school then must close to any major events or programs that we're going to have at the school over the summer. So we'll have the stadium, so athletics, but we will not have access to major spaces. That means if you are running summer school per se, that might have to be relocated. So there's going to be a flow of information from construction to let us know exactly what access we will have throughout the summer. But I just want parents to be aware, we're officially, for major programs, we are closed this summer, and it will likely be that way next summer as well.
Thank you, Doug. So we're going to have 2 new sets of bathrooms. So that is really great. And I made a mistake. These are by the gymnasium. So this one is by the gymnasium, and the one that Doug just talked about is by the auditorium. All right, I'm going to go ahead and switch over. Are you able to see the other slides now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure if I had to reshare or not. There we go. All right, so I wanted to share that after we heard about the county executive cuts, we learned that there was going to be actually it wasn't a Montgomery County Council hearing. I typed that in wrong. It was the Board of Education hearing. So the Board of Education announced a public hearing. We immediately were able to get students and parents to put together testimony. We got speaking slots. We took most of the speaking slots. I think we had 21 out of 29. Plus we got the mayor of Rockville to testify as well. And we were able to really share really great testimony on why we don't think our project should be delayed any further. And I talked in my testimony how we were first added to the CIP in 2009 with a completion date in 2018. And we've been continuously pushed back since that point. And now we don't know when this project is going to be addressed. So the testimony is great. There is not a public, and the board did, respond and appreciated the students coming out. The acting superintendent came down and talked to the students, and we appreciated that. But the Montgomery County Council does not have any further public hearings. They are going to be making their decision in May. So after spring break, we'll share some information for you all to, I'm going to share some bullet points that you can write a letter to council members. And I'll provide the email address as well, or email addresses. So you can share what your thought is about them voting to not approve the Wooten project. So, we want to get to them before they vote in May. And then some of us are also meeting with the Montgomery County Education Committee. This is in their purview to talk to them further about this. Meanwhile, SGA has been doing a great job of contacting council members and talking to them and meeting with them as well. So, we'll continue to do that. I'm not sure it'll make a difference, but we're going to try. And so I'll send out more information after break. Coming up is our April PTSA meeting is coming up on April 16th at 7 p.m. That one we're going to have, our plan is to have multiple topics, and it's like choose your own adventure. You get to choose your own breakout room. So there'll be multiple, we'll have 2 sessions and multiple topics so that you have a chance to go to the topic of your choice. We do have a topic that's specifically for seniors, and then we have a topic on the Maryland Blueprint that is really important to learn about, because there's a lot of changes that are occurring around school due to the blueprint, and we want you to be aware of it.
And Brian, can I share that one just confirmed today? So we have internships coming in. We also have a blueprint coming.
Excellent. Thank you. And then finally, I wanted to mention that every year we depend on our volunteers to keep PTSA operating, and we just can't do it without volunteers. It does take a lot of effort, and we just need people to pitch in time. We know that everybody is super busy, so we're happy to. There's a lot of different roles in PTSA, and we can use support in a lot of different ways. So as we move into the next school year, please consider volunteering. We do have 2 executive board positions that are open this year. We have the vice president 2 position, which I think I have somebody for. Still working on it. And we have Jessica's secretary position that will be open. So that's a really critical position. They all are. So if you are interested, or someone interested, we have a nominating committee, and you can reach out to me and I'll direct you to them. So and then the election will take place in May for the next school year. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jessica for secretary's updates.
Good evening, everyone. So just wanted to announce that there will not be a principal's coffee chat in April. Mr. Nelson is taking a month off, so we're going to allow that to happen. Not taking the whole month off, but you're taking the coffee chat month off. So the last coffee chat will be in May. It is May 24th. So for all you senior parents, that is a very busy day for us. I understand. So, but that is I'm sorry, it's May 17th. And May 24th is a busy day for the rest of us. And so please do keep that in mind, because graduation's on the brain. I want to talk about graduation buses though. And so again, for senior parents, it is $25 per person for members and $30 per person for non-members, only the person purchasing the tickets has to be a member. I got that question asked to me today. So if the person purchasing is a member, they can purchase all the tickets under the member cost. Please do remember that MCPS does not provide transportation for the graduates. So if your student wants to cross the stage, parents are required to provide their own transportation, and you can buy them a seat on the bus. And you can buy a seat just for the students if you or graduates if you wish. I provided the PTSA website. There is a graduation bus link there. It has a flyer, and that will also be distributed out to parents who are attending the information sessions. And with that, it looks like Mr. Nelson wanted to say something, so I'm going to pause.
Mine actually, Jessica, just connected to the graduation things, which I can do on my slide. So
Awesome. Well, then I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
thank you very much. So good evening. It's nice to be with you, everyone. My name is Doug Nelson, principal here at Wootton. Wanted to start with a few important principal updates. And then tonight, there is also a SIP update and a little bit of a more formal presentation on our work on our school improvement plan that I'm going to dive into before we transition then to our speakers. So it's nice to be with you this evening to connect to what Jessica was speaking about, which is graduation. Just a little note about that. It really is in full swing, all the planning and preparation that goes into that event. And I was speaking with the board, the PTSA board, just the other week about some things that we had in motion. But to connect to the fact that the PTSA is supporting us again with buses to graduation. When that goes out, that also means the graduation meetings are right around the corner. So the first of those is starting tomorrow. So while some students are taking SAT, there will be an 8 a.m. presentation to senior parents and any students that want to attend virtually. There was Zoom information shared. That's going to begin at 8 a.m. And we're going to go over all of the things that you need to know in preparation for graduation. And so go ahead and reserve those bus seats if you want to have guaranteed transportation down for graduation. But please be sure to join us either for the virtual meeting tomorrow, or there is also a follow-up evening meeting in person in the auditorium on Thursday of this week. We're going to be going over really important information. If you do attend the meeting in person on Thursday, that is the first opportunity for parents of seniors to pick up graduation tickets. I don't want anyone to be concerned if they can't attend the in-person. That's just the first opportunity. There will be follow-up ways for us to share with you ways to come by to pick up graduation tickets that are ready for distribution at this point in time. So if you can't attend in person, you can grab your tickets that evening. And if not, that's okay. There'll be other ways to get your tickets. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the Wootton SGA Spring Project that happened last week. I just want to give that group a hearty congratulations. They planned a lot of wonderful activities. They raised money for charitable causes. They planned ways to engage with students in the Commons throughout the week. So they had a very successful spring project. Each day had a different focus for students, whether it was wellness or whether you got to play like me, Family Feud in the middle of the Commons and win. So it was a really fun week, and I appreciate all of their efforts. Tomorrow is school SAT day at Wootton. So there is information in last week's community update if you want to dive in those details before tomorrow. Just a note about that. Students that are coming in to take the SAT, information about what location you are going for your test was shared with students. You can find your location through your student ID. So if you need to look for that in advance, you know where you're going tomorrow. And again, we'll be kicking off right around the start of school time for those taking the SAT. Those students that are sitting for that exam, I wish you a lot of luck tomorrow as you sit for assessment. And a note about the end of quarter three, that is around the corner when we get back from spring break. So the final day of quarter three happens about a week and a half after our return, and that is going to be on Tuesday, April 9th, if you want to mark that on your calendar. And then the following day after that is teacher grading day, and that is on Wednesday, April 10th. That means no class for students, but that will be the grading day as teachers prepare to update student grades at the end of the quarter. So those are the principal updates. Brian, just a little note about the technology. Do you think it makes sense for you to share the slides, or would you prefer that I share my screen to click through the slides?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it since they're already up. Oh, I can't.
Nope. Let me try then to share. or I might need to be made co-host to show those slides.
Okay. Oh, you're a co-host.
Perfect. Okay. I believe everyone should be able to see slides. I've got to move this around a little bit. All right, so this evening, I just wanted to provide an update with Wootton parents and PTSA members to give you an update about where we are with our school improvement plan. This document has been in place since our summertime when we were developing this year's goals. And part of the school improvement process is that you are coming back to it really recursively. And when you come back to that work within your school improvement plan, it not only includes instructional leadership team members, but it also includes those in central office MCPS that support us in our work, and really our coaches in taking a look at what the data are showing and where we want to go next. But one important group of stakeholders when it comes to our SIP work are our parents. And so when I was working with the PTSA board, I made the request to try to give a school improvement plan update, and they were very gracious to allow me to come in and provide some update about where we are with our goals and then where we are preparing to go next. Why this is a particularly kind of helpful time of year to give this update is tonight's presentation is really designed to let you know, A, how we created the plan. It's going to give you a sense of what goals we worked on throughout the year, but it also starts to paint the picture about where we are going to go as we continue to refine our school improvement plan work going into the summer months, which is, of course, a really important time to kind of figure out what we're going to do for the upcoming school year. So a note about school improvement plans, they're really the school's kind of vehicle to help us reach goals that we want to achieve for students. They are the real tangible action plan that helps us make sure that we're getting students where they need to go so that they are college, career, and community ready. What this goes back to, big picture. So kind of start like the highest level of what MCPS is really looking at. I want to share with you the following benchmarks that they outline as a part of the college and career community readiness. There was a flow of information at the start of this school year out of the Office of Strategic Initiatives, and we kind of hit this message through back to school night and in some of the updates at the start of the school year. But there are really 4 benchmark targets that we keep in mind when we are setting our goals, and they are displayed here on the screen. The first is for 9th graders, we want you to be on track for graduation. This really includes what credits are students earning and how are they doing in their academic classes, so that at the end of 9th grade, we're saying those students are making the progress we want them to see to continue on to 10th, 11th, to 12th grade. The next is college and career readiness according to the blueprint measures, both in English and math by 10th grade. And why 10th grade is particularly important is students are taking their MCAP assessment in 10th grade specifically for English. This is a graduation requirement. This is also where we're measuring that all of our students have accomplished and met standard in algebra by 10th grade as well. In 11th grade, we take a look at what is the academic measure for students that are taking Algebra 2. As many of you are aware, students have to take 4 credits in math. In 11th grade, our benchmark measure as a part of evidence of learning comes back to what is the grade students are learning in their Algebra 2. I'd like to call it the grade 11 benchmark because when you see our math goal, you're going to see the alignment of how we are creating the goals at Wootton to align specifically to this system-wide benchmark measure. And last but not least, where are students when they graduate? So we're taking a look at our seniors to see how they were doing with their cumulative GPA and whether they are earning the credential programs that we really want to see students have accomplished by the end of their high school journey. So these are the benchmarks that we're really working on as we develop our SIP goal. A little note about how we develop our SIP plan. So this is kind of the timeline. Again, it's not a timeline based on this month you're here, but these are really kind of the steps you have to take down the path to kind of formulate and then implement your school improvement goal. We have done most of these at Wootton, but a little bit about how we kind of did this. The instructional leadership team, we analyzed loads of data. It was student academic performance data, how they did on specific assessments, both internal and external. We took a look at student voice data through surveys, what teachers said, through staff surveys. We looked at so many different forms of data, all of that to kind of create a real sense, a tangible sense of what was taking place at the school. Because after we understood the data, we then conducted a root cause analysis, which is a series of why questions that helps move specific members of the ILT deeper into what we think might be the cause that we want to tackle when we establish a goal. So over the summer, we were conducting a root cause analysis to ask why we think a specific question. I'll tell you the one that I worked on, which was attendance. We were asking why questions about why certain groups attend less as compared to other groups and what might be the contributing cause to a lack of attendance for some of our students. Then we take, once we have identified the root cause, we set a measurable goal. We call these SMARTY goals, and we set them in 4 areas: math, literacy, culture and climate, and well-being. We're going to go over those in just a moment. And last but not least, we write our action plans. The action plans have really been in place since early October. And then throughout the year, we are trying to accomplish meeting those action plans so that then we are able to see where did we make progress, what did we accomplish, what was the result of what we accomplished, and if it actually met the prediction we made about where we wanted to go with specific action steps. And then that starts the process again of where we come back to look at our school improvement plan. Just a note about SMARTY goals. The SMARTY title really just gives us an acronym of what we want to make sure all of our goals are designed to do. So we want our goals to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. And so all of those components kind of get looked at by the staff development group, which is really a part of building our school capacity to work on school improvement plans. And so we have 4 goals that should meet this criteria. Last year's plan had 1 literacy goal, 1 math goal, 1 well-being goal, and 1 culture and climate goal. This year, MCPS is moving us to have 2 literacy goals, 2 math goals, and 2 culture and climate goals. Now, I'd like for everyone to not see us as like creating an entirely new goal or direction to go, but this does give us space about where we want to refine or how we want to take some of our goals a little bit further, since we have done a year of work based upon most of these already. So this is kind of our place to grow and continue to develop. Here's the examples of our literacy and our math goals for this current school year. So let me share those with you. So by the end of this school year, at least 89% of our Black students, it shows you the increase here, and 82% of our Hispanic students, their increase as well, will meet the evidence of learning measures in literacy with a C or higher and English 9. So evidence of learning, you can find more information about this on the MCPS website if you want to see how the school system puts this together. But one of their measures is academic success in certain classes. And so we want to take a look at which students are earning a C or higher, specifically on identified subgroups, and then focus in on supporting those students to improve academically, because academic performance is really in this district measure what we take a look at when it comes to student performance. The math goal is designed in a similar way. It's going to focus on academic measure, but it's also going to be a different content. And then you're going to see goals like the percentage goal is a little bit different. So for math, 83.9% of Black students, the increase from 79 or 78.9% to this 83.9%. And similar goal in Hispanic, we want to see a percentage increase. We'll meet the evidence of learning. Again, this is around the grade that is earned, and the focus course for this is in Algebra 2B. So if you remember back to those district measures and benchmarks we looked at earlier, this aligns to the Algebra 2 performance. We want to see students' academic performance increase here. Next is our climate and culture SMARTY goal. This one is around building staff capacity to nurture positive relationships and use of equitable practices with all students to foster a culture of belonging. Want to really highlight that part of it. So as we are working with teachers to design professional development, taking a look at what kind of approaches we want to see teachers use with students to nurture belonging. The reason we looked at this goes back to another district initiative that you all might be aware of, which is our anti-racist audit. And in our anti-racist audit, one place that the data really jumped out to us on the instructional leadership team is student questions around belonging. And while many of our students feel that they belong, we notice that the data are different in the specific questions around belonging. signaling to us that some of our students do not feel that they belong as much as they could. So we want to develop a culture and foster that in and around this sense of belonging. So we are working on relationship building and how to employ equitable strategies as a way to help nurture a sense of belonging. And the last goal here is the well-being Smarty goal. This one is about specific attendance. We looked at attendance rates, and what we notice is based on the overall percentage, our Hispanic, Latino, Latinx students, they have a percentage that does not match other student groups, signaling to us we can improve their attendance percentage. So if you take a look, 38% was the percentage we were looking at. This was the group that I was working on in ILT. And what we've done is, again, professional development. We have done trainings on attendance intervention. We've really done some helpful work in restructuring our student well-being team, which is the group that intervenes when it comes to attendance. And I'm happy to report we are actually seeing data move. So we report the 10% chronically absent student data bi-weekly at Wootton. We share that broadly with teachers. We take a look at it as student well-being team. And what we've noticed is that 38% rate that we were looking at before, the trend now is between 18 and 16% over the last 3 months. So that is a good move, more than actually the goal that we established to move this year. But it's a good example of how kind of school improvement plans can actually move some of the data measures that we want to see improve for us. Last little note about some of the things that we've been doing underneath the umbrella of school improvement plan work this year. They are summarized here. Of course, we have our SIP process, and it regularly brings us back to look at data. But one really strategic move we make with this is teachers all across the state of Maryland are asked to write student learning objectives, which is really action research for a teacher. You identify student groups that you want to improve, and you figure out a way to really intervene and nurture something you want to see students like grow and develop. Our SLOs are aligned to our school improvement plan this year. We focused on equitable teaching learning and then connected those to the MCPS essential habits. And our time around professional development in this realm at Wootton happens the first Monday of every month in what we call our rolling staff meeting. And we develop, design, and then train, and then evaluate whether our professional development was effective or not. And that happens monthly at our school. Culturally responsive teaching. We just conducted a walkthrough today, and we were looking at that as the school improvement plan process, going into some classrooms to take a look at culturally responsive approaches, group work, students collaborating, seeing really diverse instructional materials that kind of really connect with our students. So that is helpful to get out into classrooms and kind of put your pulse on what is the current state. We, of course, worked on chronic absenteeism with training and monitoring that I just shared on the last slide. And then this also was a time in our school improvement plan, specifically to goal 3, to nurture our work around the No Place for Hate initiative that we continue to train on and complete the action steps we want to take to become a No Place for Hate school. So that is really the update. What's going to happen next is we will be into data collection mode again, surveying students, surveying staff, and taking a look at what we really want to focus in on so that we are prepared to kind of develop. And it's not create school improvement goals for next year, but it's really fine tune or make adjustments based on where we are now and where we want to go next year based on our focus this year. That is all going to take place May, June, and July going into the summer months. So those will be our next steps with our school improvement work. And that completes my presentation. And so, Brian, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, well, we're going to now move into our special topic for this evening. So I'm pleased to welcome back 2 of our Wootton alumni who have their who are founders of the Potomac Oak Tutoring Center. And it's just so great to have alumni come back and share information with us. And they're also parents of Wootton cluster students. So I'm going to turn it over to Elisa to get us started.
So thank you again for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. I don't know if everyone knows this, but Pavel and I actually met at Wootton. So our entire family is really centered around Wootton. Let me start by sharing my screen. please do let me know if you can't see the PowerPoint. If I don't hear any objections, I'm going to assume that the slides are
Yeah,
working.
see it on screen.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, it's there.
Perfect. Awesome. So I'm going to go through the slide because it's taking up my entire screen. I won't be able to see the chats, but I believe we're here to answer questions at the very end. So the first slide just goes over my educational background. I'm not going to talk too much about me since I want to talk more about the opportunities that students should be seeking out for. But I do have extensive background in both college consulting and education consulting in general. So personally, what I like to do with all my presentations is kind of start big picture, like the 3 biggest takeaways. Oftentimes I find that when you're in the thick of everything, it can be very overwhelming. So if nothing else, these are the 3 biggest takeaways. The first being that grades and test scores are necessary, but not sufficient. So essentially what that means is that, yes, grades and test scores are important, but they don't tell the whole story. And we really see, bullet point number 2, extracurricular activities as something that's equally important, that could equally help you in your application to tell a story when it comes time to apply to colleges. But that doesn't mean all extracurriculars are created equal or that you should just pursue anything without really thinking about why am I pursuing this and does it make sense for me? What do I hope to learn? What do I hope to get out of this experience? So the third and perhaps the takeaway that students spend the most amount of time really thinking about what does this mean is our advice of aim to create a tightly woven compelling narrative. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. But essentially, the easy way to think about this is what works for you because that's what you want to do. That makes sense to your college application. It may not be the case for a friend or for someone else. But first, before we dive more into this tightly woven narrative, I want to talk about why having a tightly woven narrative within your extracurriculars matter. We've seen that historically, college admissions is getting harder and harder. So if you look at the graph, you'll see that generally schools are kind of becoming more competitive, admission rates are dropping. We did see a kind of bump during that like weird 2019, 2020 cycle, primarily because so many kids are taking gap years with COVID and all. But since then, we see a steady decline. So basically harder than ever. So why do narratives matter in that case? Well, because essentially your competition will have similar GPA, similar test scores. Your extracurriculars can really help you to stand out, make you different, make you unique and memorable. So this goes back to that last piece of advice being aim for a tightly woven narrative. So question we work with students on to answers, does your extracurricular profile reflect what you are both doing inside and outside of school, right? So this is what I mean when I say what works for you may work for you, but not somebody else. So I listed some of the most popular majors. It doesn't include every major, but these are pretty common majors among students who are interested in pre-law. So you got your poli-sci majors, public policy majors, econ majors, sometimes other things like philosophy and history might come up. Once in a while, I might have a STEM kid who's also really interested in pre-law. So I listed a few extracurriculars that may help a pre-law student formulate that tightly woven narrative, right? So for example, if you're thinking about being an economics major with a pre-law, right, kind of curriculum in university, your best friend might be volunteering in the hospital, but that might not make the most sense with what you want to do with your application. So you could see some of the programs. I will say that many of the programs kind of have varying different deadlines. For summer opportunities in particular, they tend to range between December and April deadlines, with a whole bunch clustered in January and February. I realize that it is now March, so I went ahead and I highlighted opportunities that are still open for application. Some of these programs are year-round, so it's not just summer. So for example, the Office of the State Attorney varies based on the semester. So their deadlines are different for when you want to, volunteer or intern there. So based on when you apply, you just have to pay really close attention to the deadlines. Pre-med kids, very, very popular. Pre-med kids usually are my life sciences major, biology and chemistry being the most popular. But technically, you could be a dance major and still pursue pre-med. So I listed some, again, internships in this field. The Gains in Education, Mathematics, and Science GEMS program is still open, especially in this area. So the local programs, the virtual programs are still open. But we really want to think about like why you want to do pre-med, right? That's a big field within medicine. There's so many different avenues of research, of populations that research is focused on. So you really want to do something that makes sense to your profile. I'll give an example. A few years ago, I worked with a student who was interested in pre-med biology major. And one aspect of research that she was really interested in was women's health. And she was talking about how, she was reading a lot of research and data, and a lot of the advice or, results from the research weren't as applicable to women as it were to men, because so many of historical clinical trials focus more on men. Like the people who participate in trials were more, more men than women. So she actually taught me a lot. She told me about how the classic heart attack symptom of, clenching your left arm and feeling numbness in your arm, that's a symptom that men often feel that women sometimes don't. So they might not realize that they're having a heart attack. In any case, so she spent that entire summer before her senior year researching about the women gap, the gender gap in all of these clinical trials and what we can do and recommendations that she would like to see in the real world. So I thought that was great because it really spoke to her passion within pre-med, right? Like even though she knew she was doing pre-med, that's still a really big field. So her research project over the summer really spoke to her and worked really well with her narrative. Okay. Some other popular majors include engineering, business. So I did not include every major, but again, these are the most popular ones. The great thing about living here locally is that we have so much access to these great organizations that offer a lot of opportunities to high school students. And the other thing is because one of the positive things coming out of COVID is that a lot of these opportunities have gone online. So whereas, if you were only restricted to local opportunities, now a lot of internships will allow you to do virtual internships. So the world is really your oyster. But aside from these big national organizations, you could think about local opportunities as well, right? Like, yes, they're local, but they're part of like NASA is part of a bigger national organization. But it's not just about like, oh, the name, like NASA has a big name. Sometimes I tell students is just because there's a big name to the internship doesn't mean that is necessarily the best. So I've had kids, for example, intern at big name organizations, and maybe they didn't have as good of experience as somebody who interned for a smaller engineering firm, like a local engineering firm or architecture firm, where because it was smaller, they got to do a lot more work. They got their hands dirty a lot. So as you're applying to these internships, one thing you want to think about is, what do I want my experiences to be like? What would be meaningful work for me? I do want to talk about business majors in particular, because that is one field that really appreciate real world jobs, right? So not just like internships and volunteer work, but working at the movies, working at the mall. I've actually spoken to a former admissions consultant at Cornell, and they talked a lot about how for business school students in particular, they look for that real world experience because they want to know that the student has engagement with people who aren't necessarily going to be the nicest person to them, right? Like getting experience in customer service and dealing with and handling with customers who may be a little bit upset, right? That is a crucial skill within the business world that they look to see if students have experience for. And like we talked about, not all opportunities are created equal. So one thing I tell my students to do is once you've accepted an internship or volunteer work, whatever summer opportunity or even school year opportunity, sit down with whoever is your mentor, your supervisor, the person you answer to, and try to figure out like, okay, what are some things I can help you do, right? Like what research are you working on? What projects are you working on? And at the end of the day, what can I do to show that my work was done, right? So like not just, I worked on this project, but can I show that I went to a conference? Can I show that I worked on this particular presentation? So kind of what deliverables, what tangible thing can I show so that when it comes time to apply for college admissions, I could really show the work that was done. And we say that because in the college admission space, the space is becoming more and more multidimensional, right? So yes, we have essays, yes, we have resumes and applications, but now a lot of students also submit videos and photos. So having that kind of other visual representation can be very helpful. Okay. Another way to think about this. So not all students know exactly what major they want to pursue or, even what field they want to be in, right? So I don't want it to make it sound like, well, you could only pursue these opportunities if you're ready to create that tightly woven narrative, right? That's definitely not true. It is totally okay to not have a major, even when you're applying to college, you could apply as undecided. It's also totally okay to not know your field. I think summer or internships or throughout the year or jobs throughout the year is a great way to figure out what do I want to do, right? A lot of times students don't know if they like or don't like something until they get that crucial hands-on experience. So another way to think about getting the experience that you want isn't necessarily by field or by major, but by opportunity, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is summer jobs. So we talked about a little how business schools especially love real world jobs, but that's not just business schools, right? So across majors, having that hands-on experience is important. So if you're looking for different summer jobs, you really want to focus on skill development. What am I trying to learn in this job? What can I get out of it? And if you really think about critically, I don't just mean working in an office. Like I had a student, for example, who spent the summer working at Chipotle, and he actually learned an incredible amount about public health and food preparation safety, right? Um, I think around his summer job, Chipotle might have been hot water. Like there's some articles about some outbreak. I think it was salmonella. I don't remember exactly the outbreak. So he actually learned a whole ton about, public relations as well, but also like what they were doing, from the public health standpoint. And that actually really helped him gain real world skill development. And another thing you want to pay attention to is always trying to expand on your experience, right? So whatever you did, try to show that you could make it into a bigger thing, a bigger impact. So for example, if you spent the summer mowing lawns, that's great experience. You also earn some money, but you could also make that into a bigger thing, right? So what I mean by this is you could set up your own website, kind of having your own lawn mowing company or business. And that really helps you, get a lot of real world skills like management, right? Like customer relations, advertising, so forth, but it also shows your entrepreneurial spirit. So these are all really great qualities to have regardless of major, but particularly great for business. Okay. Another common opportunity throughout the summer and the school year is volunteering. I find that volunteering opportunities are easier for students to access, especially if they're younger, just because a lot of the heavy duty internships have age limits. It's pretty common for lab research to require 16 or 17 at time of application. But volunteering is a little bit easier to access because everyone needs volunteers. And we always say that it doesn't matter what major you are, it doesn't matter if you haven't thought of a major, volunteering always looks good on your resume, right? Colleges always want kids who genuinely care about their community, and you don't need to necessarily know what major you want to do when you're volunteering. Again, that could help you with the process. So for example, one of my students over COVID was just really bored and she was going crazy. She had like nothing to do, just trapped inside her room. And so she was browsing and she was trying to volunteer, and she saw a really cool opportunity from the Smithsonian Museums where they were looking for volunteers, online virtual volunteers, to transcribe documents from the 1800s. So yes, it was in English, but it was in like such weird, like older English, and it was also kind of hard to read these historical documents. So it just wouldn't work with AI. So they needed real life volunteers to go through each document and try to transcribe in a systematic, organized fashion. And she thought it was such a unique opportunity and ended up loving it. And she is now pursuing a history major and just got into U Chicago as a history major. So again, you don't have to know your major to do the opportunity. It could be the other way, right? You do an opportunity, realize how much you love it, and then decide to pursue that major. Okay. Internships. So internships, the difference, I have had parents and students ask me, like, what is the difference between internship and volunteer work? I think it could blur, right? Sometimes something could be volunteer and internship. Sometimes it could be an internship and volunteer work. But I would say that generally speaking, internship is like closer to like field experience, right? Like closer to what you want to maybe pursue in college. They're definitely a bit more competitive. So you do want to apply early. You do want to apply to many, just because you can't just assume that by applying to one, you will necessarily get that internship. And just like when, adults are applying to real world jobs, you want to tailor your resume. So you don't want to send the same cover letter and resume to every place you apply to, because that means you're not tailoring yourself to the position that you're applying to. Right. So if an internship is really focused on having customer service skills versus an internship that's really focused on life science knowledge that you're learning in school, you really want to make sure you have different resumes and cover letters for those. And again, they don't have to be like official sounding like NASA or NIST or NIH. You could create your own venture. And what I mean by this is you really want to think about, okay, so this is the opportunity I have. How can I make it into a bigger thing? Like we talked about lawn mowing. And I'll give an example. I had a student who was interning at the local doctor's office, pediatrician's office, and her initial job at the internship was just to help with patient intake, really working on the computer. And this was also during the tail end of COVID. And she was realizing that, as a teenager herself, having been trapped indoors for ever with COVID, she was realizing that she didn't have a whole lot of knowledge on things that she thought teens should have knowledge on, like mental health, like nutrition, like obesity, right? And so she approached the doctor that she was working for to come up with these one-pager publications that she will work on, like very easy, digestible. Like if you're a teen struggling with mental health, these are resources for you. These are hotlines. These are things that you can do, right? And the doctor ended up using these one pagers and putting it in the doctor's office, which is great. So now this is like way bigger than what she initially thought, because she really, critically thought about, well, what can I uniquely do to help my internship have impact? Okay. Other opportunities include college courses. So as a result of COVID, a lot more colleges are now offering online courses in addition to their in-person programs. So these are official university courses, pre-college summer programs. They're usually taught by their actual professors. So sometimes if you do, especially the in-person ones, your classmates might actually be kids who attend that college that are just trying to get extra credit, maybe graduate a little bit early and such. This is such a great way to show that you are ready for college life, that you're ready to take on the college curriculum. It's a great way to get to know the professors at the school. I have had kids who've done these college programs, done really well, and been able to get letters of recommendation from their actual college's professors who taught those programs. And of course, it's also a great way to socially connect with a school, get a better understanding of their social life, their campus life, and really test out whether or not you kind of see yourself on campus. And I've listed a few examples of these type of programs. Last but not least, this is actually like my favorite aspect of extracurricular, my favorite type of opportunity, just because I genuinely believe that anybody can do this. And I also think that when done correctly, passion projects can be the single most powerful extracurricular on your resume when done properly. So first, what is a passion project? A passion project is basically something that you're working on by yourself or with, one or a few other people. It is not a huge organization or a huge club. It's something that you're leading the charge on, something that you're deeply passionate about, and that you want to use this to create some type of impact. I know that sounds a little bit vague. And it is really because passion projects look very different. It looks like very different things to very different people. And you'll see what I mean in a second. But Passion projects are really tremendous for college applications because they are unique. And when they're verifiable, it's an extra bonus because it really shows that this was the real deal. And they should have measurable impact. So we'll discuss a little bit about what all this means. To help with that component, these components really, having press coverage of your passion project is a huge plus. It could really be a game changer. So what are passion projects that students have worked on? I had a student create her own invention. Let me click on this link. Is everyone able to see the link that popped up? I'm gonna assume yes, unless I hear otherwise.
No,
No. Okay.
we only see the slide.
Okay, let me stop sharing for a second. Okay. Can you now see the link that popped up?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So this is a student I worked with back when she was 14. Yeah, she wasn't even able to drive yet, but she invented a device that helped drivers stay awake. That was her passion project. So you can literally see a picture of it right here on the screen. And it was her passion project because she talked a lot about how she would take these long trips from Maryland to visit family in Florida. And it was kind of scary because her dad would like have trouble staying awake for those long car rides. And so she came up with this device. I'm not gonna lie, she's way smarter than me. I would not know how she actually did this, but the device measures your brain waves such that if it detects drowsy driving, it will start blaring music, and hopefully, you'll wake up and pull over. So this is her. This is an article about her, major national news, right? U.S. News World Report. So that was her passion project, an invention. Okay. There's also passion projects involving advocacy. So this is another student. She used to be part of AMOCO, but her family moved out to Howard County. And she was actually testifying in front of the Howard County Council about the importance of having a more AAPI inclusive curriculum, especially history. So she talked a little bit about how really in US history, you learn about internment camps and the Chinese Exclusion Act, and that's it. That's all the AAPI history she learned. So she testified about the importance of having a more inclusive history curriculum and what that looks like. Based on her passion project, so it wasn't that she just testified, but based on that testimony, she got in contact with her local delegates and she actually worked on a report with the delegate to how to fine tune the history curriculum, like specifically what can be done, what can be added. And her report was sent to every single history teacher and department in Howard County, which is huge. It's amazing. And we did include all of that with her college application. So like I talked about college admissions being more multidimensional than ever. So with her application, we included videos of her testimony. We actually included a link to her report, her finalized published report that was sent to all the history teachers in her county. Okay, whoops. And then we have this. So this is one of my favorite videos that students have made completely on their own. So his passion project, so he's an engineer student, so it makes sense that this is his passion project, working on the car with his dad. I'm gonna play the video. It's 2 minutes, but well worth it.
Ever since I was a young Bob, I always wanted to work on a large project. This past year, the pandemic gave me the free time and my car the excuse of needing to add value and utility to it. I needed to undertake such a project. First, I started by finding my mounting points. Then I drilled the bolt holes in my mounting brackets. Then I prepped and welded my brackets and coated the brackets in a rust preventer. Now I moved on to building the actual bar itself. First, I started by bending my tubing, then cutting it to length, and prepping it for welding by beveling the edges. Then I tack welded my 2 sections of tubing together before I tack welded them to the brackets on the car. I then took the bar off the car in order to fully weld my brackets to my tubing. Then I welded out the joint between the 2 pieces of tubing at the top of the bar. Then I set about making the cross piece of my bar. I did this by grinding the ends of an extra piece of tubing we had so it would fit against the outer frame of the bar. Then I proceeded to tack weld the cross piece to the bar. To add some structural integrity to the right side bracket of the bar, I made a set of gussets and then welded them to the bar and bracket. After I had finished building the bar, I then took a grinder to the welds in order to clean it up a bit. Next up, I welded on the mounting brackets for my lights and covers for the open ends of tubing. After welding on the brackets for my lights, I then made a set of gussets in order to add extra rigidity and strength to the brackets to make sure they wouldn't fall off due to vibrations. Finally, I went over the bar with a grinder to remove any remaining blemishes. Next up, it was time to get the bar prepped and painted. And last but not least, run the electrical wiring that would allow me to use the lights.
Okay. So yeah, so that was a months-long passion project for this student. So it took summer and some change. But I think that video does a couple of things. Definitely unique, definitely makes it verifiable. So he can't just say, yes, I worked on this with my dad, but who knows if he actually did, right? And also the video shows a lot of personality as well. But most importantly, it shows all the skills that he learned. Right? Like that project is not a joke. He learned so much about engineering, electricity, and so forth, and made a lot of sense with his application. He's actually now entering his, I want to say, 3rd year as electrical engineering major at Princeton. So, again, I think a passion project can really show the student in a light and make them unique and memorable in a way that nothing else can. So at this point, I'm going to hand the mic over to Pavel. And I think Pavel's going to talk a little bit about the SAT.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so I'll be talking about a little bit about test prep and specifically the new SAT that so many of you have probably heard about. And I believe Wooten is actually administering the school day SAT tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, if not today, but I believe it's tomorrow. Maybe if that is not correct, please by all means, yep. I see a thumbs up there, so fantastic. So yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll start the presentation. And so let's see. And let's go ahead and make sure that everything is working here. All right. So first, just some basics about the SAT and the ACT. As most of you know, it is your college entrance exam. And even though a few decades ago, maybe some colleges on the East Coast may have preferred the SAT and maybe some in the Midwest would have preferred the ACT. As of right now, colleges have no preference over which test you take. All four-year universities accept both tests. As far as the biggest difference between the two, the way I like to kind of summarize it for those of you who are not familiar with the test, the ACT is generally considered to be the more straightforward of the two tests if we're looking at the questions, but more fast-paced. It is a very fast-paced test, and not everybody can finish it on time. So the only way to really find out which one is right for you is to sometimes just try the ACT and see if you can keep up with the pace, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about this new SAT that, like I said, students will be taking it for the first time in many cases. They're administering it for the first time this month. And so it is something that is very, very new, and they've made some changes to it. The biggest change, as you may have heard, is that it is digital. So in other words, students are going to be taking it on their computers. The one that's going to be administered, for example, tomorrow for 11th graders is going to be, students are going to be coming in and taking it on the computer at school. It's also adaptive. Now, that I think there's a lot of misconceptions that kind of come along with what it means to be adaptive. I think a lot of times students are kind of thinking that once they answer a question, the test will then kind of depending on how they answer that question. It's not as adaptive as that. So in other words, what they're doing is the SAT is divided up into 4 modules. There's 2 verbal and 2 math modules. And everybody takes the same first module for verbal and the same first module for math. And then depending on how they do on that first module, they're going to get an easier or a harder second module. There's really only 2 options. And so that kind of, hopefully takes away a little bit of pressure from students. They don't have to worry, once they answer a question, oh my God, did I answer it wrong? The next question seems easier, or did I answer it right? Now it's harder. They can just kind of focus on completing each module at a time. Last, I think also very importantly, in many ways, it is still assessing students on the same general skills. So it's still your fundamental skills of reading, writing, math, and data analysis. And so we're going to get into a little bit of that momentarily, specifically what areas it focuses on. But anybody who's kind of been prepping for the old SAT or, still assessing students in the same skill. So it's not like you've been wasting your time. And for those 11th graders who may have already taken the SAT and are now maybe a little bit skeptical about trying the new SAT, again, keep in mind, it's a lot of the same skills. So you're not at a disadvantage for having prepped for the old SAT. If anything, I think you might even have an advantage. So specifically, what is on the new SAT? And so I'll start with the verbal section, and they brought back some things from those of us who maybe, for example, remember the older SATs. They change them periodically. Specifically, for example, for a long time, for the last, I would say about 8 years or so, they didn't have any vocabulary questions. They're bringing that back. They're making some changes. The vocabulary questions now are not as, I would say, outdated. They're supposed to be a lot more, I would say, widely used. And so as a result, it does sometimes help to kind of study a specific set of vocabulary words that, are good to know for the SAT, but also I would say roots and prefixes. I see the new SAT leaning more and more into words that you can, if you don't know, understand or make a pretty good guess as to what they mean using roots and prefixes. So that's something else that students can kind of do to prepare. Now, one of the big changes is now they're also eliminating the long reading passages that a lot of students had trouble keeping up with and giving them short reading passages with just one question per passage. However, they're still also giving students text from, as Elisa was just mentioning, older English texts from like the 1800s that a lot of students struggle with. And, I was just working with some students actually earlier today, and there were some Shakespeare, poems that they were assessing students on, and they're asking, what does some of these Shakespearean, stanzas mean? And so it helps to, I think, expose students to that type of writing. So if you're a little bit worried about, not being able to maybe fully understand the 17 and the 1800s, I would encourage, for example, reading authors from that time period to kind of help expose students to that. And I think that can go a long way, especially if you're, in 9th or 10th. Data analysis. They are giving students tables, graphs, but really it's still mostly, reading, because for each table and graph, there's a short passage, and that's usually where the information that students need is. They're introducing something interesting that I've never seen on the SAT before, and almost looks like a law school exam question. So for those of you who have taken the LSAT, you may remember there was a logical reasoning section or two even, where students had to read a short passage and then try to figure out, they would ask a question about the logic behind it. There are a few questions in the verbal section where students are now being asked to kind of, what would most logically follow a short passage. It's not the same as the LSAT, don't get me wrong, but it's an interesting component that they're adding, and it does kind of deserve a bit of a special approach. The one thing they're not changing, and the one thing that is the same on the old SAT, the current SAT, the ACT, is the grammar. So they're consistently assessing students on grammar rules, specifically punctuation. They're really heavy on that. And that is one of the easier ways that students can, quite frankly, improve upon, because there's only so many grammar rules. Not only does it help with the SAT or the ACT, it also helps students just become better writers. And so, that's something that students can do. And probably the most different part about the new SAT is at the very end of the verbal modules, there are the notes questions, where basically they ask students, or they give students some different notes that a hypothetical student could have taken, and they ask you to maybe summarize those notes, or to maybe, how to best emphasize certain notes, certain parts of notes. So I think all of that is also kind of makes the new SAT a little bit different. On the math, in many cases, they're still assessing on a lot of the same concepts. Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, geometry concepts, a little bit of statistics. I've seen, some questions about the mean, median, and mode, and also a little bit of trig. Now, some students, I understand, cover that in Algebra 2 sometimes, and pre-calculus. But by and large, I would say that if you have taken up to Algebra 2, you have taken most of the math that you would need, and so you are ready to kind of take the SAT as far as the classes that you need for math. And again, if you're beyond Algebra 2 into pre-calculus or even further, then again, then you've really, I think the challenge is almost to go back to the concepts that you learned years ago and to refamiliarize yourself with those concepts. Well, what makes the SAT and the ACT for that matter different is that a lot of times they like to not tell students exactly what concept or tool to use to answer the question. They oftentimes give students word problems, and they often have to figure out on their own, what tools to use to answer that question. And so I think that makes these tests a little bit different from what students a lot of times are doing at school. In school, a lot of times you have a specific unit that students are covering, quadratics or maybe something else. But the SAT and the ACT don't necessarily say, oh, this is a quadratics problem. So I think that takes a little bit of getting used to. Now, I do want to kind of take a step back and kind of talk about in general how to approach the SAT, and for that matter, the ACT, and talk about what some of the current trends are as to when to take it, what studies suggest the best time to take it is, when you're likely to get the best scores. So we do see more and more students kind of prepping during the summer and taking their first test at the end of the summer in late August, if it's the SAT, or at the beginning of the school year, if it's the ACT. For the most part, they offer these tests I would say on average, once every 2 months or so. So there's no specific test day. So if you miss one, you can just take it usually a month or two later. Now, I have no qualms about students kind of taking it in the beginning of their junior year. I would not recommend taking it any earlier than that. There is almost no advantage to doing so. Colleges will not be impressed with students taking it in 9th or 10th grade. Sometimes we see students doing that or wanting to do that. And we usually say, unless you're getting a perfect score or near it, and even then, I really don't see much of an advantage. Colleges are not impressed by that. At the end of the day, they just want to know how well you do, and it doesn't matter when you get that score. With that being said, it's also important to keep in mind that scores improve over time. And as you go to school and as you take classes, your reading, writing, math, and data analysis skills will get stronger. So it's not a surprise that a lot of times students will get their best scores, or studies say that students get their best scores toward the end of junior year, not at the beginning. Which brings me to my last point here, which is the myth of trying to get it over with early. And I sympathize with that. And I see a lot of parents and students kind of coming into the test prep process, perhaps with this notion of, we just want to take it early, maybe at the beginning of 11th grade, and then just focus on schoolwork, focus on extracurricular activities. And as much as I want to tell them the answer that they want to hear, I have to tell them that a lot of times that's just not how it works. Of course, you can get most of your test prep done during the summer, and it takes less time to prep for your second or third test. But based on our experience, if you take it in the beginning of the school year, chances are students will look at their scores and say, you know what, I feel like I can do a little better. And yeah, that's true. As they get a little bit older toward the end of junior year, their reading, writing, and math skills will be a little stronger. Chances are they'll get slightly stronger scores. So as long as students are kind of open-minded to taking it again if they need to, I don't have a problem with them taking it on the earlier side, but I also want to make sure that they have all the information. If you could only take it once, then of course I would recommend that you take it at the end of junior year, not at the beginning. And traditionally, that is when students would take these tests. So it's not too late to take it at the end of junior year. I would say I would recommend not taking it any later than maybe April or May, so that you have a few chances to retake it if you want to. But I would say, even as late as April and May isn't the end of the world, and a lot of students traditionally would take it at that time. March, for example, the school day SAT that's happening tomorrow, a lot of students are taking it for the first time, perfectly okay. If they want to retake it, they could take it in May. I believe June is another option, and also August as well. And I believe it gets a little trickier after that, depending on when the early action and early decision deadlines are. All right, moving on to another important thing that I think is worth mentioning, which is the relationship between weighted GPAs and scores. And a lot of times, I think students, parents, they want to get the best score that the student can. And I think, that makes sense. But I also think that it's important to kind of have a specific goal in mind. And specifically, the SAT or ACT score that students need ultimately is the score they need depends on what their weighted GPA is. So if you take a look at some of this data, this is basically some of the average accepted weighted GPAs, ACT scores, SAT scores to some nearby colleges. And you can see that there's, Georgetown, Towson, Frostburg, and so forth. And what I really want to try to emphasize is that if, for example, a student, let's say, has a 4.0, they really don't need to necessarily aim for a perfect score. Because in this case, for example, if they have a 4, they might be applying to a college like Towson or American. And again, this is weighted GPA, just to be clear. And so in that case, the scores that those colleges are looking for are in the 12 or 1300s. It is, if, for example, they're applying to University of Maryland College Park, and they have a 1500, but they have a significantly lower weighted GPA, it's very debatable whether an even higher SAT score will help. And I think that's something to keep in mind, because I think that will save students maybe a lot of stress, maybe a lot of anxiety if they understand the relationship between the SAT and the scores. And so I think one of the things that we recommend is kind of first getting a sense of what colleges a student might want to apply to checking to see, is their GPA strong enough to apply to those colleges? And then kind of deciding, okay, well, based on these colleges and my GPA, I'm gonna need these test scores, and then kind of aiming for those test scores. All right, next, I do want to quickly mention about whether you should submit your scores at all. And so I do want to emphasize the test optional versus test blind dichotomy. So during COVID, a lot of colleges removed the testing requirement and they became what's known as test optional. But test optional is not test blind. And so what we're seeing a lot is that students who submit scores, or many colleges, will have an advantage over those who don't. That doesn't mean students who don't submit scores can't get into those colleges. Like Elisa was saying, in that case, it's really the extracurriculars that are going to have to be strong. Maybe the GPA will have to be a little bit stronger than the average accepted GPA. But I think by and large, they, if you have a score for some colleges, it can help. And so that goes back to, again, what is the GPA? Is your score helping or hurting you? And if it's hurting you, then you may want to go down the test optional route. But if it's helping you, then of course, submit your score. And that decision can vary from college to college. For some colleges, you may say that, yes, my score is going to help me. But for some, you might say, well, it doesn't quite reach the average accepted score that these colleges are looking for. So as a result, I'm going to go test optional. Test blind is when colleges really don't care. There's not too many schools, but it is becoming more popular. And in that case, you don't have to worry about your score, not submitting your score, hurting you. And in that case, you can, focus on just making sure that you have strong extracurriculars and strong grades. We're noticing, and this is something that we're really noticing over just the last few months, that more and more colleges are coming back to test scores. And one of the reasons that they're giving is that what they thought was going to make a difference as far as making the colleges more diverse, for example, and getting more diverse applicants or diverse pool of applicants isn't necessarily panning out the way they thought it would. And so, for example, you can see here some headlines, for example, from UT Austin, Yale, and some of the other colleges bringing the testing requirements back, because what they're finding is that the students from, let's say, underprivileged socioeconomic statuses that are applying without test scores, when they look through the last few years and they, check to see what scores they would have submitted, they're realizing that the students were actually hurt by not submitting their scores. And so that's why a lot of them are kind of bringing it back. I see that maybe there might be a question, but I will go ahead and answer as many questions as I can at the end. This just kind of goes back to show that some colleges do tend to prefer scores. And if you submit a score, it could significantly increase your chances, again, if the score is strong enough. But if you feel like it's hurting your chances, then by all means, apply test optional if it's an option. Okay, so I wanted to kind of make sure that I get to through some of the recommendations. And as far as our general recommendations for 11th graders, I do want to emphasize that. Usually we kind of start out by saying that students should keep both tests on the table. You don't really know which one you're going to do better on. Again, there's some misconceptions about, let's say, the ACT or the SAT. Specifically, the big one that I hear is, well, the ACT has a science section. But as some of you may know, the ACT science section isn't really a science section. It's a data analysis section. Very little science students need to know or to remember. And but it is a little intimidating. And so I think a lot of students are a little shy to, explore the ACT for that reason. But, I think it just makes sense to try to take a mock, see if you can keep up with the pace. That's the big thing. And if you can come close to finishing it on time, it can become a viable option. And then once you take a mock ACT, compare it to the PSAT or take another mock SAT. The PSAT that almost everybody takes in 10th or 11th grade is usually a pretty good proxy for the SAT. That was the purpose of it, is to kind of give students a chance to see how, they would do on the SAT if they took it that day. And so I encourage everybody, 10th grade, 11th grade, to make sure that you do take the PSAT, even if you're not fully ready for it. Most students take it cold, didn't really prepare for the PSAT, and that's perfectly okay. You can still use that score to compare it to the ACT and see which test you're likely to do better on. Then, like I said, I think it makes sense to select a test date to make sure that you know specifically, what the end goal is. I'm not a big fan of students kind of prepping endlessly with no test on the horizon. I think in general, having a specific test date in mind that's not too far away, maybe about a couple of months away, that students can really focus, can really help them, I think, make the most out of the preparation. So this way, they're, like I said, they're a little bit more motivated and they don't grow too tired or exhausted by these tests, which test fatigue is sometimes a real challenge. And again, based on our recommendations, we would not recommend necessarily prepping for, an exuberant amount of time. Based on our experience, 8 weeks is more than enough time to prepare for your first test. And if you decide to retake it, it's usually less than that. After you get your scores back, which is usually going to be within a few weeks, you can go ahead and kind of take a look to see, well, how did I do? Maybe it's time to reevaluate and maybe consider the other test. And again, we'll emphasize that the time you spend preparing for one test is not wasted if you switch tests. It's a lot of the same skills. So by preparing for one, in many ways, you're preparing for both. The one thing I was going to say is also for younger students, there are things that they can do if they're a little nervous. We do recommend taking a PSAT, on the earlier side, definitely in 10th grade, but you could actually take it as early as 8th or 9th grade. On College Board, they do have these SATs. You would have to download the Blue Book app, which will allow you to kind of take these practice tests, but they're right there for kind of everybody to take. And they have an 8th grade PSAT. So students as young as 8th or 9th grade can take it. The key, though, is not to look at that score and to say to yourself, oh my God, I'm so behind. As I mentioned, the scores are going to get stronger as students get older. So it's unfair to kind of take a 9th grader score and then say, well, it's shy of where they want to be a few years down the line. Instead, what we recommend is take a look at the percentile, because the percentiles really are a much better indicator of whether a student is where they want to be as far as test scores in 9th or 10th grade. Specifically, for example, I'll use University of Maryland. I believe the average accepted score for Wooten students to the University of Maryland is about a 1420 or so, which is right around the 94th percentile. It's a very challenging school to get into, and over the years, it's just become more selective. And so what that means is that for a student to have, a good chance, let's say, they'd want to score in the 94th percentile. And as a result, what the 94th percentile means is that they would have to outperform 94% of test takers. Again, that's a pretty high bar. And so if a student wants to kind of check to see if they're on pace to get that score, well, in 9th grade, if you take that 9th grade PSAT, for example, or the 10th grade PSAT, if you're scoring around that percentile, even if your score is not a 1420 yet, it probably isn't, then you are on pace. But if maybe, for example, your percentile is lower than that, and University of Maryland is one of your top choices, then that's, I think, a sign that maybe you'd want to try to start honing the skills that these tests assess on a little bit earlier to try to maybe gain some traction and make up for some, get to the percentile that you want. And last but not least for the younger students is really focus on the skill development. These tests, there's a reason why colleges are bringing them back. They do see them as being useful. And I know that a lot of people don't like tests, a lot of students in particular don't like tests, and I don't blame them, and but at the same time, they do aim to assess students on very specific skills. And so kind of working on those skills, I think, is the way for younger students to try to get to where they want to be. And some skills take longer than others to develop. So for example, the grammar that I was talking about, well, you can probably learn the grammar rules within a few months and become pretty proficient. But the reading skills usually take a little bit longer. So if you're struggling on the Shakespearean sonnets or the Jane Eyre type of writing from the 17 or the 1800s, in 11th grade, it's a little tough to try to, become familiar with that type of writing within a short period of time. Instead, if you're in 9th or 10th grade, try to read some of those authors or, some of those poets so that you become a little bit more familiar and exposed to that type of writing style. I really think in many cases that is the best approach. And I think it'll help you in many other aspects of your education as well if you're a student. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to mention, but I believe that is basically it as far as, the test prep side. So again, hopefully nobody feels too overwhelmed or too intimidated by the new SAT. It is nothing to necessarily be worried about, but I do think it's important to have all the information so that you can kind of make informed decisions. And I think, again, maybe taking the PSAT if you're on the younger side is probably the first step that I would recommend. If you're an 11th grader, then like I said, I think you can, take the new SAT without worrying about the old SAT if you're preparing for that. But also, as I mentioned, if you're not sure where to look and you want to prep on your own, then really College Board has a lot of good practice tests, and you would have to download an app, the Blue Book app, that students can practice and become familiar with the interface of the digital SAT. But also, as you may have heard, Khan Academy is partnered up with College Board. They have a lot of good practice material as well. So I would recommend students and families just explore those two resources. I'll go ahead and I'll stop my share now. And I wasn't sure if we had time for questions or anything like that. Or Brian, I don't know if you were hoping to, keep this show on the road. So you're more than welcome to, keep going. But I do want to thank everybody for their time and for the invitation.
There are a few questions in the chat.
Okay. So here it says, yeah, absolutely. When and where, so I'll read the questions out loud so everybody can hear them. When and where can we get a test score? So I would say that if you're referring to the mocks, I would say that on collegeboard.org, there are 4 realistic practice tests that students can take and get a test score once they take it, and it's immediate. So they don't have to worry about scaling it. They just sit down, they download the app on College Board, and they take it. It takes about 2 hours and 15 minutes or so, and they'll get a score. And again, for younger students, I believe they have a PSAT for 10th and maybe 8th and 9th graders as well. So that's where I would go if I wanted to get a sense of how I'm scoring. If you were talking about the real SAT, then you would, once a student takes the real SAT, they'll get their score on College Board as well. They should have an account. And so that's where they would find their scores for the real test as well. And a great question, is the PSAT the same as the SAT? And the reason why I'm kind of smirking is because for a long time, I would say that they were basically the same test. But that PSAT was a little bit shorter. And there were maybe a few questions that the SAT had that the PSAT didn't have, because the PSAT was designed, the PSAT 10, for example, is designed for younger students. So I wouldn't expect to see any trick questions on that. But I would say that on the new SAT, when I took the new PSAT, it's the same time. And I'm not seeing a lot of differences. So again, There might not be, some trick questions, but those are pretty rare on the SAT as well. But for the most part, I would say that they're very similar. And maybe to somebody who is more of a layperson, they might not be able to see the difference. And then a question about the mock ACT. Is it digital? So glad you asked that as well. They are actually experimenting with a mock ACT or with the ACT that's digital. And I think they're even offering it some places. But because the ACT is so fast-paced, I would be very hesitant to take it digitally. I don't think I would be able to finish it on the computer. And I noticed that for me, the paper-based version for the ACT allows me to finish it on time a lot better than the digital version. So I always recommend students sign up to take the paper-based ACT because it's so fast-paced. And as far as taking the ACT, there's a couple of different ways to go about that. If you wanted to kind of take it on your own, you could go to act.org, and there are a few practice tests on there that you could take and then scale. Or I would say that you could also, probably sign up. I know that Wooten offers mocks periodically. The Wooten PTSA website, I believe, actually has some places where you can take a mock, and then usually you'll get your scores back within a week or so. And I think somebody was asking, where can I see the scores of the previous SAT that my son already took? I would say that if your son took the real SAT, which means that so I want to be careful here. The new SAT is just being administered for the first time in March. And there has been already one official test date. And that was, I believe, in the first week of March. And so if your son took that test, those scores will be coming out, I think, until the 22nd of March, I want to say. And they will pop up on their collegeboard.org account. So if you check with your son, I believe that you will see on the 22nd or around there on their College Board account the scores. I also believe that, and somebody might correct me, but the guidance counselors might also have access through Naviance to their official SAT and ACT scores, and they also should be able to help with the College Board account if they're not sure what the login information is. But yes, I would say that if they took it in March, then they should wait until the 22nd. But if they're taking it tomorrow, then it's probably going to take about 3 to 4 weeks, last time I checked, to get the school day SAT scores back. And in that case, you might just have to check back then.
All right, do we have any other questions? That's it for the questions in the chat. In terms of the recording, we always put the recordings on our YouTube channel. And you can find the link to the YouTube channel on the WootenPTSA.org page. There's a section there, and you can go to the YouTube channel. But we'll make sure that folks have access to that. So we'll post it there after this presentation. Are there any additional questions? All right, then. Well, I really want to give a huge thank you to our alumni for returning and giving us such great insight. So thank you, Pavel. And I know Lisa had to leave, but we really do appreciate it. And we do appreciate all the support that Potomac Oak Tutoring gives PTSA. They're a sponsor for Wooten PTSA as well. So we appreciate that. I hope everyone has a wonderful spring break. Remember to mark your calendar for April 16th for our April meeting, where you get to choose your own topic. We have multiple topics. So thank you, everyone, for joining this evening.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.